Hello everybody, Bradley here. Hey, thought I would do a quick video for you guys. A lot of questions I get asked quite often is how often do you clean your airbrush and how do you clean it and tear it apart when you're not using your gun. So what I will show you today is a demonstration on the airbrush that I use. This is the Eclipse HPCS. It's a gun that I've been using for probably the last 6 to 8, maybe even 10 years. I like the gun for a lot of different reasons. For one of the reasons is the gun is very durable, meaning a lot of the parts and stuff stay together very well on it. They're very strong and sturdy. The needles last a long time in them. The head assembly is very durable on it. So I always look for a gun that I can basically go down and pick up at any time and use it. It doesn't take a whole lot of working to get it to flow with the paint and make it work for you right off the bat. So this is the gun that I'll use, and I'll tear apart for you and show you how we clean them. As far as how often do I clean them, honestly, I only clean them maybe about once a month. So the process that I'm showing you is something you're not going to have to do every day or every time you use it. It's not very time consuming. It takes probably maybe 20 minutes to get it taken out of the cleaning material and assembled and put back together. So it's something that I don't do all the time. When do I do it? Usually I'll do it after I have a few batches that I'll do. If it's, a lengthy, a 12-hour spray or even longer. Some of the paint builds up in it a little bit easier, a little bit more over time. And it also depends on what type of paints and how much you've been spraying of those paints. So about once a month. If for some reason I feel that the gun is not spraying exactly how I want, I will tear it apart and put it back together. So as far as the guns themselves, the product that I'm going to show you that I use, there's not really a whole lot that you can hurt except one item. The one item is these little rubber O-rings. And on these Iwatas, they have one that we'll take off, and I'll show you when we do it. But regardless of whatever gun you're cleaning, the product that I'm going to show you that I use, you'll want to remove these O-rings, because what will happen is the material that you're using to clean these will actually cause these O-rings to swell. And what they can do is when you're assembling it back together is you can actually pinch these O-rings, or over time they become very brittle and they may snap and break on you. So anytime you're using the product that I'm going to show you, you'll always want to make sure you remove these O-rings. And I'll show you how we do that when we tear it apart. As far as the cleaning materials themselves, there's a lot that's out there that I'll show you that I use. One that's pretty common, it's called an airbrush cleaner. Honestly, this stuff is pretty much ineffective as far as cleaning everything that we're going to want to clean once you're going to have to disassemble the airbrush. What we're going to want to remove is paint that's gotten down inside of the gun where it sprays through the head assembly, the nozzles, other areas where this airbrush cleaner here, it won't actually attack that and clean it like we want it to. This here, I'm assuming, is basically used between color changes out in the airbrush when you're painting it. It's very mild. It's very not effective. I think it would almost be comparable to saying water that you're using. And honestly, the iso alcohol that you can also use is more effective than this airbrush cleaner. So this will come with it. If you're out looking for something to clean your gun, like I'm going to show you, you're going to need something much stronger than this here. This here is what you're going to use in the process when you're cleaning out the paint between the change out in the gun. So this is one method. A lot of this bottle actually came free with the airbrush itself. And they also make Createx or a couple different brands that make it in a bigger 4-ounce bottle or even an 8-ounce bottle of the airbrush cleaner. You can use it. It's not going to hurt anything, but I don't think it's going to be as effective as what I'm going to show you today. So the one that I use all the time, it's 4008, and it's called Airbrush Restorer, and it's from Createx. I buy this body. I think you can find them at the stores. I'm not sure, Hobby Lobby, or I'm sure your craft places where your airbrush are carried will have it, but this is what you'll want to use. I've not found anything else has been more effective than this 4008 Restorer. This is a little 4-ounce bottle. I want to say it's probably 8 to 12 bucks. Not really super expensive. Very, very effective in what you're doing. This bottle, when you're taking it apart and clean it, I think I've used this bottle, it's last over a year. So you're not using it that often, but very effective. If you don't have this, pick yourself up a bottle of this. This is what you're going to need. And this is what I'm going to use when we show you how I soak and clean the parts, is this 4008 Restorer. So moving on to the gun itself, I've got a couple of guns here. This here is the one that I've been commonly using to paint with. This is one of my backup brushes that's probably 1.5 to 2 years old that I'll show you. And what I'll do is for the time purposes of not taking a real long video, I've got one already assembled I'm going to put back together. I'm going to show you how we disassemble this particular one. So keep in mind, a lot of these brushes are slightly different, so there may be a different method of how the head assembly goes on, or the handle or the plunger and stuff are different. But use your owner's manual, instruction manual that come with your gun, how to assemble it and disassemble your airbrush. So this is the Iwata Eclipse. What I do is I start basically taking it apart. You'll take your handle off. You'll take your needle out. You'll always want to be very careful, whatever gun you're using, with a needle. This here is basically what creates and makes your design nice and smooth. Because if you take this needle and you drop it, you crack it, you bend it, you break it, this is going to basically destroy and take your pattern of your airflow and paint flow out of your gun and totally change it. So you do not want to drop this or bend it. You want to be very careful of that. So take the needle out. You'll take all the other parts that come to the handle and all the assembly inside of it. If you're not familiar with it, what I often do, or you can do, is take digital pictures as you take it apart, so that way when you go to put it back together, you're going to remember how it looks. If you don't have the instruction manual with you. This particular gun, it all comes apart pretty simple. Here's the spring to it. Here's the plunger part, the little flapper on it. This part comes out. And then on the head assembly, what you'll want to do is take it apart. It'll unscrew there. This is the part that's going to have the O-ring on it. And what you'll want to do is, you don't want to break it, and you don't want to cut it. You don't want to use the needle to go on in there and try to pull that on out. What I always use quite often cleaning the airbrush is a toothpick. They're wood, they're pretty soft. You're going to hurt the toothpick usually more than you're going to hurt anything on the gun. So you can usually reach down underneath, get a hold of that O-ring very carefully, and roll it off the head assembly. If I can get under here. Like that, and roll it right on off. And now you've got it off. That's really the only O-ring that you have to worry about on this particular gun. What I always do on this particular gun, so you don't lose this or forget about it, on the handle it's threaded. I just kind of take it and roll it across the handle, put it on there. It's kind of a reminder if when I go to assemble this back together, oh, there's that O-ring. That way you're not going to lose it and you're not going to misplace it, and you're going to have it as soon as you assemble the gun. So I always hold it on the handle. And basically you have the gun all tore apart. Okay, you have everything that you're going to want to take and clean. Take the rest of the head assembly apart. And what you're going to want to do is, when you go to clean it, the best method that I've found out to do is I have a little 2-ounce jar that you can use. There's a lot of different ways you can use it, parts you can put in a little container, whatever works best for you. I always find this one and put a cap on it. The thing that I like about it is it's clear. These parts have been soaking in it overnight, and when you take the gun apart, you know, people say, oh, I've got the gun really clean. You would be surprised, and I'm not sure if the camera will actually pick it up, what kind of debris comes out of the inside of this gun. And keep in mind, I was spraying with these guns. The paint doesn't come out and it doesn't get on your product that you're painting, but it's still gunky stuff that's caught up in your gun. So when you clean it apart, this cleaner, this 4008 Restorer, will actually remove all of that for you. So looking at it in your eye, you think that it's clean, but you'd very be surprised of all the material that you'll actually pull out of that. So what I do is I always fill the jar maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of the way up with the 4008 Restorer. You'll take your cap off, and all the parts that we just unassembled, drop them inside of it. All the pieces, everything except the handle where we put the O-ring on, there's really no need to clean that. You can just wipe that off with alcohol. There's nothing that is going to affect the spraying of the air gun with a handle. So I always just take the handle and set it aside when you're doing it. But all the other parts, the spring, the head assembly, all of that, that's going to go right inside this container. Okay. Put the cap on it, let it sit. Some people have also used a sonic cleaner. I have never used one. I've always felt that it's been effective just putting in this jar. I'd like to maybe get a cleaner later down the road to see if it makes any difference, but I'm always surprised of how well and how clean the gun comes out just by letting it soak overnight. When you first put it on in, you'll see some of the loose stuff start to come up, but throughout the day, if you're walking by or you see, you can always put a little shake on it and kind of get the extra stuff that comes out of it. Let it sit overnight. You can let it sit in there for a couple days. It doesn't really hurt anything. All the parts that are on there are pretty much chrome plated or brass, so it won't really affect anything as far as the damaging the air gun itself. So even if you don't get back to it the very next day to clean it out, put it back together, you're not going to hurt or damage anything. So everything goes into the jar, put the cap on it, let it sit, come back, and you'll be surprised what comes out of the bottom of it. So what we'll do now is we will move on to the part where I've already got the gun that's already been soaking and cleaning, and we'll put the parts back together. It's basically just the opposite of disassembling the gun. However, there are a few parts on this that I want to show you. You want to make sure that's very clean. Even though it's been sitting and soaking in this solvent, you'll want to make sure that it's very clean before you put it back together. So here's the parts that have been soaking. Your needle, all of your head assembly and such that I'll have out here for you. When you're putting it back together, there's a lot of different ways to lube the airbrush, the plunger, the other parts that are on it. This is what I use. It's very simple. It's called Iwata Lube. It comes with the airbrush. It's a little bottle. I'm not sure if it's a ½ ounce or how much is in it. This is going to last you, I would like to say, basically the life of the gun. I've never had to go out and buy more of it. All the other airbrushes that I've had, I've never gone through the entire tube. So if you are, you're probably cleaning your gun a little more often than you should have to, or you're putting too much of this on. So this particular lube that came with the newer guns is a clear. Okay, it's kind of like a silicone. The older guns years ago used to come with the same type of bottle, except it was like an aqua blue or a teal. This is much nicer. It's a lot smoother. It's a lot easier. It flows on better. The other teal color stuff was more of a stickier, kind of a syrupy type of product that you put on it. So I'm glad they switched over and gone to this. If you have the blue, it will work. But if not, try to find a little bottle of this clear. It works a lot better and it's much easier to it. So when you have your gun, a couple things that you're going to want to look at. And you can use it when you're cleaning out your gun. You'll go through toothpicks, you'll go through Q-tips. I use those quite often, obviously, because they're a softer product and softer material than anything that you're going to want to clean on the gun. So you're going to destroy these and ruin them before you're going to hurt your airbrush. So you want to make sure that when you're cleaning it, that all the paint looks like it's removed from the outside of it and also the inside, okay? The airbrushes, the way that they're made and the way that they work is air goes in through the bottom and it has to exit out the nozzle of it, the top of it, okay? If something is blocked inside of there, the air is going to have nowhere to go, so what it's going to do is going to start creating bubbles in your cup. Everybody says, I'm having bubbles in my cup, the paint doesn't go out the nozzle where it should go. What's the problem? It's very simple. You've got something blocked that's not letting the airflow go out. It could be contaminants in the paint, a thicker paint that didn't get mixed up. You could have been shooting metal flake that might have caused it to plug. So a lot of the things that you're going to look for when you're assembling this is to make sure that they're clear and totally clean before you put it back together. So to avoid the bubbles, you have to make sure that the air can exit the gun the way that it's intended to. So you'll want to look down in a lot of different areas of the gun to make sure, like where the seal is at, where the head assembly goes back together, that there's no paint that's plugging any of these little holes or the entire outlet itself. Also look down inside of the cup. You'll see where the very bottom of the cup, where there's the paint will flow down to the very bottom, that's nothing is blocking that also. So that's a very good visual inspection, very easy to do as far as on the air gun part itself. Okay, if those are not clean and you still want to get more out of it, very simply use some of the 4008 Restore on a Q-tip. You can go down inside of the cup and clean it out. You can also take it and pull some of the Q-tip off, put it inside of there and spin it and rotate it around to help clean it as well. So once again, the 4008 Restore will not hurt any of the inside of the chrome, anything on that. The only thing that you will want to avoid is down inside of the little slot here where the trigger goes. There is a plunger and there's a springs and there's O-rings inside of this bottom part of the air gun. Out of all the years painting, I have never taken this apart. And the reason being is I don't let anything get inside of that where it can drip down into the plunger to affect the O-rings. And you keep it well maintained and clean. So if you want to, when you're doing it, you can use some iso alcohol. 91% is what I use. You can put on the end of your Q-tip and you can actually go down inside of this slot and you'll feel it fall through, and you can look down and see where the plunger's at. Take that and you can rotate that around inside of there. The alcohol is going to evaporate, so it will not affect the O-rings at all. You can use that to go down inside of there and clean it. You can also go back inside and clean anything out inside as well with the 91% alcohol. So as far as the gun itself, if you have all those areas clean, you're pretty much good to go with it. The O-ring at that time you can put back on. Pull it off of your handle where we were storing it and put it right back over the top. That is the only O-ring that you'll take apart. If you have to take this apart, I've never had it apart. I think you can get the plunger and the spring and the O-ring and everything else to get that back together. Like I said, all the years of painting, I've never had to take that apart. So if you need to, look at your instruction manual. You may want to consider, getting those plungers and O-rings back together. I'm assuming that they would clean up like these would. Once again, make sure you don't get any of that restore on the O-ring inside of this because it'll cause that to expand. So once you have that clean, you're good to go. The other parts that you're going to want to make sure is very careful to be clean is the head assembly. And all these go back together the same way that you took it apart, but what you want to do is do a visual inspection when you're putting them back together. This little needle tip part here is probably one of the crucial parts, because what it is the needle, as it's in the gun, goes inside of that, and it's obviously tapered to adjust the paint flow as it goes in and out of the gun. When you're pushing this back in and out, you can see how the taper goes inside and out. It doesn't go out very far at all. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure that it flows in and out very easy, because if not, what sometimes happens, even though sitting in the restorer, the inside of this needle assembly, the head assembly, paint will get caught up inside of that and it won't come out very easily. So even though it looks very clean on the outside, you start to assemble it, when you go to put the needle back through it, all of a sudden it doesn't come out all the way, and you can say, wow, I can really feel stuff inside of there. And you can, once you take the needle, you can kind of roll it around on the inside of there, and you'll feel sometimes some paint that's came inside of that and kind of clogged it on up. So what you can do is, when you see that and you notice it, you can take a toothpick very carefully on the inside of it and roll it around inside of there. When you pull it on out, you'll see that you can be pulling all kinds of paint and debris out of that. Keep rotating it around, and you can use any of the 4008 Restorer or the iso alcohol to clean it. But you can rotate it around, you can help pull some of that debris out of there. It'll come out relatively easily. You can also take this needle and also kind of work it through. Do it very carefully, because you do not want to take and start pushing that in further. Once you feel that needle stop, don't go any further, because all you're going to do is start to open up the end of the head assembly here, and it's not going to spray right from that on out, and you'll need to replace these. All these parts you can buy and replace, so even after time, if you feel you want to get a new part to put on it to see if it's going to spray different, you can do that. I typically have never had to replace one throughout the life that I've had the gun. So usually if you drop these or lose these is when you'll want to replace them because you have damaged them. So once you feel, and you can kind of look down through there, if you look through a light and see through something, you can see that that's pretty much cleaned out and you get no more debris out of it, you're good to go with that. The other part that's very critical, and this is usually what's going to cause the air bubbles inside of the cup. Paint will also clog inside of this and cause it to bubble back, but this is kind of the last ditch effort, because the needle hole size is a little bit bigger on this than inside of here. If you look very carefully inside of this head assembly, there are 3 little bitty tiny holes, okay? Those 3 tiny holes is where the air has to exit from the bottom, and it helps draw the paint out of the gun. what happens is you can get some paint or debris that will clog up these 3 little bitty tiny holes. When it does that, it's still going to let some air go through there, but it's not going to spray a nice even flow. A lot of times you'll get paint that'll sputter when you're shooting. Chances are one of these holes is plugged up. 2 of them could be plugged up. If it's usually 3, that's when you're going to start to have the paint where it's going to start to bubble up in the cup, because it's not letting the paint flow outside of the gun, and it's pushing it back through the top of the cup. Very carefully, once again, what I use, and I don't know, there might be a tool out there that they sell to clean it, but I found this pretty effective to use. You can also use this needle assembly to go through and very gently clean out the holes inside of this. You need a kind of a steady eye and a steady hand to do it. But what you can do is you can clean out the holes that are inside of there just by gently pushing it through. When you feel it stop, don't force it or push it any further, because all you're going to do is you're going to potentially ruin the head of your needle or inside of one of these holes. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, what I would suggest to do is put it in another jar of the 4008 Restore, or maybe even try a sonic cleaner that will help kind of cleanse that out a little bit better. When it is clean, you can look through that with a light, and you'll see all 3 of those holes will be totally opened up. Once again, you can also use a Q-tip on the outside with a Restore to kind of help clean the end of that out. And you can also use on the inside to clean all the threads and all the other assembly inside out as well. So once again, if you do use this like I do, be extremely careful not to put it in partially and snap it and bend the tip, because all you're going to do is be replacing your needle. Over the years of doing it, I feel comfortable doing it, but I'll tell you, you do have to be careful doing that. So if that part is clean, you're pretty much good to go. The other parts that go back together on it aren't as crucial, and they don't plug up. There's a little bitty hole inside of the top of this head assembly here, but it's quite a bit bigger, and you can clearly see that. A lot of times what I use is just a Q-tip to go inside of the hole and clean it out. It cleans out very easily. When you go to assemble these parts back together, and you know that it's all clean, gently just put them on, and put them on hand tight. You don't ever want to take a pair of pliers and crank it on down. It doesn't need to be that tight. When you go to unassemble and take it apart, you're going to appreciate it, so you're not going to have to be having things struggle with it. It does come with a little wrench to help kind of tighten these back down. If you do use it, just only go to where it's tight. You don't need to force it. When you put them back together, remind you, you've always got the O-ring back on. It's basically just the same process that it is disassembling it as putting it back together. Twist it back on. And just put it on finger tight to where it stops. Once again, you don't want to have to really wrench on that, torque it down really tight. The lube that I had mentioned about using, a couple spots where you want to make sure you're using it when you get it back together. I use it in 2 spots. This particular spot is on the back part of the flapper, and what it does is it rotates. It's kind of like a rocker, and it adjusts the paint flow. So when you pull it back, it shows how much paint you're going to be pulling out. And what it does is kind of like a little hinge, and all I do is I will take it and I will put a couple little small drops on the back part of the hinge. You don't want to take it and you don't want to squeeze a whole lot on it, because you're going to have this inside of your gun. And you don't want it to be blowing around and having air and stuff getting and blowing it inside of your gun around. So just put a few small drops on the hinge part of it when you put it back together. The other part is the plunger itself. This is the most crucial part. And what it does is this basically, when it goes back inside of your gun, it goes up and down. That adjusts the amount of air. And what happens is when this gets dirty over time, is it wants to stick. So when you're pushing down on it to get the airflow, you're going to feel it. Sometimes it'll get stuck in a position, the air will continue to flow, or it doesn't give you that good feel that you want when you're having the airflow go through. So you'll want to take the lube and you'll want to put it on the part right here that's going to get buried inside of the gun, where the plunger goes down inside where the O-rings are at. So just coat this. You don't want to coat the whole top of it, just the portion where it goes inside of the gun. This particular gun has a little bevel on the back side of it, so when you pull it back, you'll get full throw. But with it on there, you're going to put the lube inside of it, and you're going to want to take it and you're going to want to assemble it and put it right back down inside the hole where the plunger goes in at. You're going to feel that when you push it in and out, the spring that's inside of there, it's going to let that trigger flow up and down nice and even and slow with it. So if you have trouble when you're painting that you don't see this plunger coming up and down very smooth, chances are you'll want to clean that on out and make sure it flows very easily for you. So the assembly of the gun, the rest of it is basically pretty much the way you took it apart. If you have any questions, look at your manual. You can go online. A lot of times these have the parts an exploded view online that you can look as far as taking it apart and putting it back together. So a very simple step, not a whole lot of product that you use. Like I said, I use the 4008 Restore. This will last you literally a year. The Iwata lube, like I said, I will usually go through the gun and replace the gun before I end up having to buy more lube. So another thing that's very important along with cleaning and maintaining the guns is you need to use these guns and keep them clean as you use it. This is really the only tool that we're using when you're painting, other than the talent that you've got and the skill and the process and how you paint, but it's only going to work as good as you keep it clean. So I'm fortunate enough that when I'm airbrushing and I'm painting and I switch out colors from one to another, I have a wash tub that I go over and I clean the gun out with and I spray the water through it. If you're using another method like, you know, some sort of a spray bottle or a drip bottle to clean the water out, that's fine. The more you keep it cleaned out between your color changes, the less often you're going to have to tear this apart. And that's like I say, I only tear it apart really once a month or every few weeks if I have downtime and I'm not going to be needing the gun to spray with to clean it out. But make sure you just keep these things clean as you're using them. Okay, if you find out that a lot of times when you're starting to paint, something's not working right or it gets plugged up, there's a lot of quick fixes that you can do. Is just taking the head assembly apart. You don't have to tear the whole handle apart and do a complete breakdown on it. You can just take the head assembly off, carefully try to clean out the tip. Typically, that's what will plug up with paint. You can do a quick clean out of that. You can use the iso alcohol. You can use some 4008 Restore if you have to. Usually, if I'm down painting, I have something like that, the iso alcohol will clean that out. The other thing you can look to is if paint has got down inside of the holes, you can tear this assembly apart relatively quick. Try to clean it out with a toothpick or a Q-tip, or if you have to do the needle trick, you can do that with it as well. But maintaining your gun and keeping it clean as you paint is the most effective thing that you're going to want to do to avoid all these tear downs and the lengthy process of doing it. It only takes about 20 minutes to tear it apart and to put them back together. You're going to let it soak overnight, but you don't want to be doing that all the time. You don't want to be getting in the middle of your project that you're painting, and now you have to keep constantly taking it apart to get the paint flow out of it. So just try to maintain the gun and keep them as clean. Don't drop them. Don't let the head assembly get beat up and banged up on them. They're going to last you a lot longer, and they're going to work pretty much any time that you pick them up. Which, like I said, mentioned earlier on, is it's one thing I like about the gun with cleaning them and maintaining it. You don't have to do anything. You go down, you fire up your air compressor, you can pull back, and you're ready to spray paint and take off. You don't have to worry about, now I have to get my gun working for me. So it's a very simple process, very easy to do, very little product that you need to use and money to invest to keeping it clean. Just be more often with it and keep them clean as you're painting, and you'll find out that any gun's going to work well for you. So hopefully that will help you out. If you have any questions on it, don't hesitate to shoot me an email either on the YouTube page or my Facebook page. Questions, comments, concerns are always welcome. And always remember to like and please share this information, and also subscribe to the YouTube page. I'll have a lot more videos coming up as well on the product and stuff that I use. So once again, thank you for your time.